everyone, my name's Ashleigh and I'm part of the Carclew Country. It's a art squad. Today I'm going to be painting with you. We're going to be creating a little piece that talks about togetherness. I think it's really fitting during these times, and I'm so glad that I can be sitting with you wherever you're comfy right now creating this piece. What I'm going to be using today are a few different materials. I'm using a stretched canvas. It can be any size. I'm using roughly a 40 by 30 centimetre canvas. Different acrylic paints. I'm also using wall paint for my backdrop, my main colour. You can use whatever colour you like. Feel free to use pinks, blues, greens, whatever you've got on hand. I chose to use blues and blacks today, which is completely alright. You can use whatever you wish, and I can't wait to see your creations from these colour combinations. Also some paintbrushes of any thickness, the backs of those paintbrushes, or you can go into your garden and find some little sticks, saw them off to make sure they're flat, and you can use them to create the dots today. So get comfortable, find a really well lit place, and let's go through the process. So the easiest base colour to use is black, so I'm going to be using a wall paint that will need 2 coats. So all you need to do is grab any sort of applicator. I use a sponge because I feel like it pushes the paint into the canvas a little more and gives more of an even coat. And then essentially you just want to lay on the first coat, let it dry, and then we'll lay on the second coat. A bit weird now, but we're just trying to get the paint on as evenly as possible. You can see it's quite opaque at the moment. We're just trying to get the paint on evenly so it creates a good foundation for the second layer of paint that'll go on much more even. Now your first coat is dry, so we'll go in and apply the second coat. When applying your second coat, be really careful, make sure you're using nice long strokes to ensure the paint is as even as possible, and wipe any excess off your brush if you feel like you're carrying too much. Don't be afraid if the paint runs up to the top of the bristles on your brush. That's completely okay. That just means that you're going to have a really nice even coat when you press the brush down to bring the paint over the canvas. So now this is dry, we're going to put in a secondary kind of background that will carry a lot of the colour and lining that's going to go through the painting. So again, it looks really messy at first. We're going to do a second coat, and we're going to really roughly map out the shape, and then we're going to cut in the lines to make them really nice and crisp. It looks really rough. We've done a really quick outline of what the shape will be. This is using a thicker type of acrylic, and it just makes it easier to control when drawing it through the canvas. Now you go in with a thinner acrylic, and that helps you sharpen up the edges on the first coat and fill in all the spots. We'll then dry it, chuck on a second coat, and then we're ready for all the little details. To try and get the lines nice and clean, especially when you're doing colour on black, it's really obvious, is to load up your brush. You're not necessarily, you can see there's a lot of paint kind of jumping into the bottom of the brush, but it's more there to kind of help give you an even type of coverage. So you kind of load up your brush as best as you can, and you almost work with a bubble of paint that comes out on the edge. So essentially you're wanting to push down and create a little bubble of paint, and then push through, and then you'll be able to see that you've got a really nice crisp line. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit shaky, you can always go in with a finer brush and fix it. And of course with practice it'll be a lot easier as well. You don't also have to work on an upright surface. Generally I'll work with the canvas sitting flat on the table. That also gives you more control. I'm just working up today so you guys can see what I'm doing. You don't have to be too specific. You just got to make sure that you get all your lines in, and you make sure your lines are really definitive and really clean. And then you can go on back in after and make sure that everything is looking good. So I'll finish this up, and then I'll bring in another canvas that I've already done the first coat in, so I can show you how I do the second coat. A really important, I guess, note to make is you kind of got to do what works for you. Generally people think that when you go around a corner, you've got to really twist your brush to make it work. You don't necessarily have to do that as long as you've got that bubble of paint on the edge of your brush. So all you're having to do is, I'll do it here, is push in. You can see where your line's going to go, and then push around, and you're still going to get that really nice crisp edge, even though you're not turning your brush. So now we've applied this first coat. It looks really rough, but that's okay. I'm going to pop this to the side to dry, and we've got one that I prepared earlier to continue on with. Starting off with the larger brush that we used for the first coat. Same as the background, we're going to use really nice long even strokes. Make sure that paint is on nice and flat. There's no large patches of paint like down at the bottom here. We'll just gently cover off this larger area. When doing this final coat of your edges, you can see that I'm taking a lot more time just to make sure they're super crisp, purely because we're not going to go back over this with another coat. This is it, and the crisper the lines are, the better the finished product is going to look. Now we're going to let this coat dry. If you have made any little mistakes like I have here, when we're done we'll go back over with a thin brush with black on it just to clean those edges up. So before we start doing any of the details, we're just going to pop them really quick with the black and fix up those little mistakes that we made. So again, really simple, load up the brush like before, and really small, simple strokes, just pushing back into what should have been that crisp line. So some of my favourite tools to use when dotting are these little guys. I think they're literally called Happy Dotters. They were created to help people create really crisp dots with mandala, but these are a lot easier and a little bit more modern than using things like sticks and whatnot. If you don't have these, no stress. You can just as easily use the back of a brush or the back of a pencil. It'll give you the same kind of dot. So because this painting is representing people coming together, the lines here are representing people travelling. So we're going to start by popping some dots in here. We'll pop some lines in later to create a symbol of a person. A little bit, it's a little bit less traditional, but it's really effective and it looks really nice. So we're going to start by doing these dots, and we'll work on some other pieces, and we'll come back and enhance them a little more. When placing dots on the page, you always want to work from the bottom up. This just will help you ensure that you've got really nice spacing. The spacing doesn't have to be even with any of these paintings by all means, so feel free to place dots however big or small, as evenly or as spaced out as you wish. Making sure you're not putting your hand in the other dots. We're going to start from the bottom section because we've got the little fix up still drying here, and we're going to start working our way through each of the sections. I'm going to work from light to dark, and we'll go through after and touch up any little gaps that we've got. So we finished this one little section. I'm going to use actually a bigger size to go into these two middle sections, just because it'll mix things up, make it look a little more complex. Feel free to use whatever size you want. You can use multiple different sizes through each section. It's completely up to you. So I'm going to jump in and do these two sections quickly, and then I'll jump back to the smaller dotted to do the top one. Something a lot of people forget is it's really easy to start working from the top corner here and working all your way down. You want to try your hardest with whatever dominant hand you are. I'm right-handed, so it's always best to work from the left hand of the canvas to the right. Otherwise, you'll be dragging your hand through the paint, and that's going to ruin the dots. If any paint whizzes away, or you go over the lines you've created, you've got black and white paint there, you can always go back over it, so don't be too stressed about that. And if that matches what you're going for, that's fantastic, you can keep going with it. I've finished these dots now, so I'm going to go through and we're going to pop some gender defining lines between each of the dots, and we're going to define each of the dots as well, while creating our meeting place as well. So now these black dots are dry, I'm going to go through with just a simple fine line brush, and I'm going to create some of those U shapes that will create people. You've got the handout in front of you hopefully, so you'll be able to see what each of the symbols are. Traditionally in Aboriginal painting, roles are split between men and women, and women do things like gathering, men do things like hunting. So we are going to define both men and women on this painting, because we're all travelling to be together. Now we've got all the people on the pathways coming towards the meeting place. We're now going to pop the meeting place up in this top corner. On your handouts, it's listed as a campsite. It kind of does mean the same thing, and be really careful. You'll see a water hole and you'll see a campsite. The water hole has a different swell, and the campsite is more definitive with the circles. It's also really important to remember that these symbols are not generic. They don't sit through every single body of Aboriginal people and their cultures. It's the same with language. So we're doing what I know as part of my culture as a Carclew and a woman, but it is different. It may be different in different places and from different people that you might learn from. Now we've popped in the meeting place and it looks really great, but like with many artworks, you'll go back and look at things and don't think they're quite right. This is your point now to look at what you want to add. You want to put your own flair onto it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my small dotter and I'm going to grab some black paint and just fill in these areas just a little bit. Not completely, but you'll see what I'm going to do. now that we've finished all the little details, and I'm sure you have too, the most important part of any painting, because you've created it, is to put your name or signature on it. Now, I use a little Posca pen to sign on my paintings. It's a 0.7mm Posca pen, and before you use it, you've got to make sure that you've got enough ink in it. So I just use a little canvas that's got some colour on it, and I push through, and I make sure that I can see the paint well enough. Put my little signature on there. You can always go over with a paintbrush as well, which is what I most likely will do after, because the Posca pen didn't show up too well. It's a little bit opaque, but that's completely okay. Thank you for following along with our painting, and I hope you enjoy hanging that up in your space. If you've got any questions, please feel free to contact me on my Facebook or Instagram page, Ashleigh Darrie Aboriginal Artist. Thank you. Bye.